Now we're going to look at supervisor, corporate, hotline, or social media. Where do your employees report bad behavior? Huge topic today, one we need to wrap our heads around, and we've got the perfect person to help us do it. Juliette Gust is the founder and president of My Ethics Suite, an anonymous employee reporting and incident tracking platform. Juliette brings to the table an intensive amount of experience as the former director of fraud investigations for a global hospitality company with 180,000 employees in more than 100 countries. And she has led more than 2,000 investigations in 75 countries over her time to now. Please welcome Juliette.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It's great to be back at the Hospitality Law Conference, and I'm very excited about the quick service and fast casual format that is new this year. I'm looking forward to the deeper dive, and I hope that this topic is as important to those of you watching as it is to me, because as Stephen said, it is timely. There have been many investigations in the food service industry, a lot of them focused on the fast food companies, and so I will get started and walk you through why it's really important to address complaints of any unethical or illegal behavior swiftly and before they become public or bigger problems. One of the things I also would like all of you to consider as we go through this presentation is how prepared your company is to address complaints of misconduct or any other kind of bad behavior. Is your management trained to receive complaints? Do they know what to do once they receive a certain type of complaint? It could be about fraud, it could be about harassment, but are they uncomfortable talking to their employees about these issues? Or have they been trained to be able to listen effectively and know where to pass on these issues so that they can be remedied quickly? Is your HR team, if you have one, trained in the messaging to employees that encourages them to speak up? Does your company provide corporate support for these issues? And then finally, one really important topic is the tone at the top. Do your leaders really walk the walk and set the example and live the code of conduct that your company has and asks your employees to live by? One of the things I wanted to cover is some reasons why it's important to talk about this. Lately, with the speed of the internet, issues are spread across the globe really at lightning speed. And so what could have been a small issue that was handled internally turns into a really big issue that becomes public and brings not only more attention to the company, but negative attention to the company and the possibility of either litigation or attention from external agencies. So I wanted to show you a few examples of what can happen when these issues aren't addressed. And the common theme across almost all of these issues that you see in the media, and the same for issues that are reported to, for example, the whistleblower line at the SEC or other agencies, is that these employees tried to address the issue internally and were either ignored or were unhappy with the response that they got. They also may have been retaliated against for bringing up the issue. So again, it's really important to consider the importance of addressing these complaints before they get to this level. Another important aspect of asking employees to report wrongdoing or any kind of unethical behavior is your bottom line. You know, there are studies that show that about 5% of revenues are lost to fraud. And in the food service industry, as you know, this is really critical. There is a small margin and you need to make the most of it. One of the other things the study showed is that the food service industry is one of those that lacks reporting options for their employees to report any concerns they might have about fraud. The other big concern that lacks reporting options are harassment or discrimination issues. Now, as most of you know, those have been kind of at the forefront of the media, of litigation, and of, you know, exorbitant settlement costs for companies because, again, usually the employee tried to address it internally and they may have been ignored, or worse, they may have been retaliated against or fired for trying to bring up a complaint. And I have what I keep a running list of all of the EEOC complaints and settlements that I'd be happy to share or talk about more in the deeper dive, but they do amount to quite a bit of money. Last year was a record amount, and the hotel and food service industries continue to receive more complaints than any other. So some of the risks that you should be prepared to expect from employees if you do encourage a speak up culture are listed here. As we talked about, discrimination and harassment, diversity, equity, and inclusion have been at the forefront. And although they may seem like, people issues, interpersonal issues that could be handled simply at the store level, at the HR level, that is true. But if they're not handled properly, they have the ability to kind of spiral out of control very quickly, and cause both, as we mentioned, reputational damage and financial damage based on litigation or settlement costs. Food safety and sanitation is another significant issue. I know I've received hotline reports from employees that say, particularly now during the pandemic, we don't have a lot of revenues. Everybody is kind of trying to keep track of expenses. And in some cases, maybe the walk-in freezers don't work and nobody's fixing it. So we're keeping our food in a refrigerator or freezer that doesn't have any, it's not cold. So things like that have been creeping up, I found, over the past year, and certainly important to keep an eye on. And if you're not at the store level, these employees are your eyes and ears to tell you that there might be something going on that isn't being addressed. Data privacy has been another big issue with cybersecurity incidents. Those are things that you really want to know about immediately so that you can take steps to address them right away. Trafficking may not sound like something that could be considered or that somebody would report about, but it is possible, and it's not always trafficking where, what you hear in the news about people being kept against their will. I've seen some cases where trafficking could include a supervisor who has, a list of stolen Social Security numbers and provides them to employees so that they can work 2 shifts or 3 shifts without incurring any overtime. And so from an above store perspective, the vision is, wow, here's a great supervisor, runs 0 overtime, is always staffed, does a great job, the staff loves him. But in reality, it's because they're using stolen identities and trying to stay below the radar to give people work that way. So what can you do to prevent this? As we talked about before, encourage people to talk about what's going on. First, train them. What is your code of conduct? Do you have a code of conduct? I did a little research before this presentation of some of the largest franchise owners in the country, and I couldn't find their code of conduct. So it is possible that they're not available online, and so through a Google search, I couldn't find them. But many of the larger companies should have something visible, not just to their employees, but to their vendors, to their guests, so that everybody understands this is what the expectation is at the tone at the top. This is what we want everybody to follow that works for this company. And if they don't, this is where you can report it. So that leads us to the second point, providing communication channels. How do you ask people to speak up? It may be very difficult for them to only go to their supervisor. In some cases, the supervisor is the one involved in the activity. So, for example, I remember a fast food restaurant in the Midwest where a meth ring was built up in the restaurant and the manager was the leader. And so the people that worked there that weren't involved told the police, we didn't know who to report this to. And so the way it came up is through the police. And so they had to close down the restaurant. They had to conduct an investigation and then find that this was going on. And the owners had no idea of the activity because people were too afraid to talk about it. So that leads to the third point, retaliation. Train your managers that if someone complains about something, is not the time to retaliate against them by changing their schedule, shifting them to terrible shifts that they don't want, making them work shifts that they initially said that they couldn't work, terminating them for reasons that may not be at all applicable or that other people aren't terminated for. So things like that are certainly items to watch out for. Also, you have to investigate and remedy the issue as soon as possible. As we talked about before, they just get bigger, they don't go away. Internal controls are generally something that most companies already focus on, but they think about it in terms of cash or in terms of some accounting issues. There are other controls that can be implemented to make sure that for example, discrimination and harassment doesn't occur. And hopefully we'll talk about that more at the deeper dive. And then some of the really tested practices or best practices, we can call them, are to make sure that your policies are clear, make sure they spell out exactly what the expectation is. For example, uniforms has been surprisingly a big issue in fast casual, where food servers, for example, might be told this is the uniform that you're going to wear, and then that changes over time, or maybe for a special occasion, they don't like the new uniform or the temporary uniform, and so they end up suing the company for violating their rights and making them wear something that they weren't expected to wear upon hire. Personal relationships and dating, we've seen, has been a significant topic in this industry, and it's important to make clear what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, when should somebody contact management, legal, HR, or corporate to inform them of a personal relationship and maybe move to another position so they're not reporting to or responsible for someone they have a personal relationship with. We talked about harassment and retaliations. Those are certainly policies that should be trained not just at onboarding, but annually. Same for the code of conduct. And the whistleblower policy should spell out all the things that we've talked about. These are the items that we expect you to report. This is where you can report them, and this is what we're going to do about it once you do report it. Social media is another important policy that a lot of companies don't have. It should spell out the behavior and the language that your employees can or cannot use if they describe themselves as an employee of the company, or if they're using anything that has to do with the company in their social media posts. And thank you again. Stephen, I will bring it back to you and look forward to talking to you all at the deeper dive.
Juliette, as usual, that was terrific information, great insight. And ladies and gentlemen, it just brings home how important this topic is. So I know you'll want to join Juliette at the deeper dive. I'm looking forward to it as well. Juliette, thank you as always, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks to you. Bye, everyone.
Bye for now.